Well, good evening and welcome to the Power Research Triangle PowerShell user group. We're glad for you to join us. My name is Phil Bossman, and my co-host for the evening is Mr. Stephen Judd. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello and welcome to everyone. I'm sorry to disappoint you that Mike Kanakos is not here, but I will do my best to stand in for the inimitable Mike. That's a hard word to say. I should have gone with something simple. Why did I do that to myself? Hello, everyone.
Well, we want to get right to the chase here. We're excited to have with us Mr. Sean Wheeler, and he's going to talk to us about working with our PowerShell profiles and optimizing them and getting started. Now, we're not sure that Sean knows anything about profiles given his work status, so we're going to see how he does. This is his first time presenting, so I hope you have a good evening.
I'm telling you what, I should have had my number cards, where I could be like, that's an 8, or that's a 9. That we'll do it like that. We'll be rating his tips.
We're just trying to build him up,
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm excited because once I saw the topic that we were going to talk about, and I knew that Sean was going to get it, I was like, "Ooh, sweet! Got the finger tense going here." So, Sean, do you need any setup, or do you want to just take it away?
I'm ready to roll.
All right, rock.
And I think one thing I wanted to say is even if you think you know a lot about profiles and you've been in the PowerShell community and you've been working with it a lot, there's always something new to learn. And I always learn something from Sean, and that's why I'm super excited for tonight. So I just want to leave you with that, and sit back and relax and feel the show.
Yeah, I hope people know about profiles, and that a lot of this is not new. Let's see. Okay, I am sharing my screen. Good. But really, what I'm going to be talking about is how to make your profile work cross-version and cross-platform. So we're going to dig into some specifics. And I dropped a link in the chat there to my presentation archive site here. These are a bunch of talks that I've given over the years in different venues. And I did this one for the Baton Rouge user group SQL Saturday this past summer. And so you can see
Sean,
it all here. Yes.
Right before we get rolling, can you zoom in on your link? Because even though you put it in the chat doesn't show up into the stream.
Oh,
so it's SD Wheeler.
Yeah, so sdwheeler.github.io/presentations takes you to the root site.
We'll make sure to put that into the YouTube description.
Thanks.
So, let's just get started. So, just some basic information here. There's hopefully you're all aware, there's actually 4 different profiles. Profiles is a common concept in a lot of command shells on Unix, Linux. There was profile scripts, I remember from the old VAX VMS days. And this is like your auto exec bat in DOS in the back in the day. Yeah, right, David. Auto exec bat. So the cool thing about this is it's layered, and there's 4 different profiles, and PowerShell runs all 4 if they exist, or any combination if they exist. And it runs them in the order that they're listed here. So first the all users, all hosts profile, then the all users current host profile, and so on. And so part of the recommendation here is you want to put the things that are common to the most people and the most situations at that highest level. And the things that are most specific to the end user and the whatever host they're in that current user, current host. So you split your content up. It's a little more to manage, but it gives you more flexibility, especially if you're trying to manage some profiles across your organization. And throughout this, you'll see I have links to things at the end of the presentation on the website there. All of those links are available, and some of them are right in the page here as well.
So can I ask you a question there, Sean, about you
Sure.
said manage profiles across your organization. Do you
Mhm.
see many, or do organizations kind of like put things in the profile? I've always put that like for myself and working through that for any users on my machine, but I've never thought to write code to push out to end nodes for.
Yeah, I mean, so through group policy and whatnot, you could deploy like your all users, all hosts, and all users current host scripts so that you have maybe some common company-wide settings that you want to deploy everywhere. So you could control that easier for the users. That's the
Interesting.
idea. Now, I don't have any sort of experience knowing how many companies do that or anything like that, but that's the idea behind these as well. Is that with the all users, all hosts, um, if you had a multi-user system like a Citrix server or whatnot, you could have some common setup for all
Yeah,
users on that machine.
I think the only place where I've put stuff in the all users, all host thing was like importing modules that I wanted anybody on this machine to do. I'd put that
Exactly.
in that profile. But it's more like, hey, on this one machine. I never, when you mentioned the across the domain thing, I never thought to actually do that across the board and even in an environment to like push it out through policy. But it's an interesting thought to, and I want to try and think about that as we go forward. But interesting that you mentioned that. So interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, and the other thing is I would be careful about what modules that you want to import. Do you really need them imported? Because they will import on demand, first use of a commandlet. So you may want to defer um, some modules. I have a whole bunch of modules that I've written for myself. And one of the things I did in optimizing was I was loading all of them. And there's some of them like I hardly ever use, and they can be loaded on demand when I want to use them. When I use a commandlet from one of those modules. So um, you want
But
to
doesn't
you want
that
to be
slow down the
careful with that.
profile loading? Sorry, doesn't
No,
that?
importing the modules, a whole bunch of modules slows down the profile. So leaving them out makes the profile run faster. Um, and if it's a module you don't use that often, like I said, it auto loads when the first time you use a commandlet from that module.
But it has to be in the module search path at that point too.
Right,
But
but
okay,
it's already installed. It's just not imported into session. You don't need
I
to
got
import everything into your session all at once.
it. Okay.
So that's one way to speed up your profile. All right. Throughout this presentation, I have this demo script that I can show you a bunch of stuff. So you can see here, hopefully this is visible enough for you folks. I'm in VS Code and I'm running PowerShell 7.3.9, and we'll just run this $profile command, and you can see. So on in PowerShell 7, your profiles are in your program. Your user profile folder, documents, PowerShell, so on. The all users ones are in the program files PowerShell 7 folder. Um, the If we go to PowerShell 5.1 and run this, you see that they're in your profile under the Windows PowerShell folder. And on Linux systems, it's going to be in your home .config PowerShell folder. So let me switch back here. Oh, and it's important to note, like I said, these are run in the order listed here. So you could have settings that are set in the all users, all hosts, and that setting can be overridden by the current user, current host profile script. And yes, Josh, the in Visual Studio, I have rulers turned on in my editor to help me line up indentation and know where I'm hitting 80 columns, 100 columns, 80, 90, and 100. All right. Where was I? So let's go to the next slide here. So when you're trying to build the one profile to rule them all, you need to think about version differences. So, for example, in PowerShell 5.1, there's special characters. If you needed the escape character, you would need to do something like this: square brackets char 0x1b, or decimal 27 for the escape character. And high bit characters, uh, same way. For PowerShell 7 and above, you have backtick E and backtick U for Unicode code points. So you have more options here. So when you're writing a profile script that needs to run across all versions, you're not going to be able to use the things that aren't available in PowerShell 5.1. So maybe you assign this escape character, the char 0x1b, to $ESC, something like that, and you would use that in ANSI escape sequences. ANSI is another one where you have to handcraft your ANSI escape sequences if you want to use them. Where in PowerShell 7.2 and above, you've got $PS style to help you out there. Of course, there's commandlet differences. The PowerShell 5.1, you have the WMI commandlets, and those are missing from PowerShell 7. You have to use the sim commandlets instead. There's no workflow support, things like that. Typically, you're not using those in your profile scripts, but always something to keep in mind. Some commandlets have changed, like the CSV commandlets output type information header, and you have to tell it not to, and that was turned off by default in PowerShell 6 and above. And then major changes to things like test connection, invoke REST method, web method, addition of for each object parallel, and so on. So again, any of these things, you have to keep that in mind and how you handle those. So let's look at some of these differences. Some of the platform differences. There's some variables. So you can see in here on WSL, we have these is variables: is Linux, is macOS, is Windows, is core CLR. Those can come in handy later. In PowerShell 5.1, if we look at that, there are no is variables. And of course, we have those in PowerShell 7 on Windows. This is admin is part of my profile. I added that. We'll see that when we dig into my profile script. Some other things like, for example, invoke REST method. If we look at the syntax for it, there's 4 parameter sets, I think. Yeah, 4 parameter sets and a total of 53 parameters. Compare that to 5.1. There's 1 parameter set with 34 parameters. So there's quite a bit of difference between the web commandlets and how they work. And same with test connection. The big one here that trips people up is there's a computer name parameter. And in PowerShell 7, that's now target name. And among many other differences. And yes, Stevie, the web commandlets are much better in PowerShell 7. Much better. Experimental features, of course, aren't available in Windows PowerShell, so you can't rely on any of these, and probably shouldn't, except for the things that PSReadline uses. Escape sequences. This is what I was talking about. So I can create some red text here using the backtick E, this ANSI escape sequence. But if we go and try to run this on 5.1, that don't work. What we can do is we can, you can assign the escape character to a variable, and you can use that in the string. So I'll assign that, and now if we run this, you see that works. But I'm going to show you an easier way to do ANSI escape sequences a little bit down the line. And feel free to chime in with questions. So let's look at some platform differences between Windows and non-Windows. Non-Windows systems don't have any of the sim commandlets, and there's many Windows-only commandlets that are not available. The non-Windows platforms don't have any of the graphical features, so out grid view and the dash show window on get help. And there's another command, I forget what it is. Well, like the show command, commandlet, and so on, those don't work on non-Windows. Execution policy doesn't exist on non-Windows. Case sensitivity is a big one on Windows. PowerShell is case insensitive but case preserving, no matter what platform you're on. However, there are components of the operating system that are case sensitive on non-Windows. For example, the file system on Linux and Mac OS is case sensitive. So you can have two files with the same name but different letter cases, and those are two different files. Environment variables are case sensitive. So while PowerShell commands will work case insensitively, if you were running native commands in PowerShell on those systems, you have to abide by the case-sensitive rules. And there's cases where, in order to distinguish between two files that are spelt the same but different letter case, you have to use proper casing. PowerShell on Windows has several aliases that mimic Unix commands, and those aliases don't exist on non-Windows. We'll take a look at that. There's no concept of backgrounding, like foreground and background processes. Everything's foreground with PowerShell. If you need something to run concurrently, you use PowerShell's job scheduling system. PowerShell doesn't support sending applications or sending commands, processes to the background like you can do in Bash on Linux. And then there's different path separators, and we'll take a look at how you handle that. So, oh yeah, there was more version differences. We can come back to this if people are interested. I'm going to skip the version, the new operators for now. The OS differences. So, for example, on there's two things going on here. Variables are case sensitive, and path separators are different. So if I'm on Windows and I run this command to split the path, this will show me all of the directories in my path variable, environment variable. If I go to Linux, and let's clear the screen, and I run that same command, it's not going to work. Well, okay, the path separator on Linux is a colon instead of a semicolon, so let me try that. Well, that doesn't work either, because the path path is an environment variable, and environment variables are case sensitive. And if I use this static member of system.io.path, that tells me what the path separator is for the operating system I'm on. So if I go back to PowerShell on Windows PowerShell here, you'll see semicolon versus colon. So if I run this whole line, now it splits the path in Linux. File system differences. I forget what this was. Oh yeah. So the system.io.path, there's these static members that show you the directory separator characters, the path separator characters, volume separator characters, and you can see them here like so.
So you just ran the colon, yeah, the colon split path split colon.
Yes.
And it didn't return anything. So
that's because that's because path was lowercase here. But when I said, yeah, when I do path uppercase, and yeah, I could change this to colon, right? And run that.
Or colon.
Well, right, colon. And run that, and now it splits.
Gotcha. But the environment variable itself is
case sensitive. Yeah. The environment variable name. And then if I use this system.io path separator, I don't have to know what the path separator character is. It's provided for me. Aliases. So here's an interesting view. So let's go to PowerShell on Windows, and let's run this command. And you see that all of those commands are aliases for different commandlets. But if I go to Linux, all of those are applications. These are native applications. And so the behavior of them is going to be different. ls on Windows runs get child item. ls on Linux runs user bin ls. And so ls here -al, you know, and if I run, if I go to Windows and do ls, it's just going to give me get child item output. So very different behavior. So that's the OS differences. And there's documentation here I linked to. If you go look at the history of modules and commandlets, there's notes here that says which modules are Windows only, and within a module, which commandlets are Windows only, or we added support for Linux in a particular version, and so on. The other article that I linked to here is PowerShell differences on non-Windows platforms. So this compares Windows and non-Windows. This is a sort of a comprehensive list of everything. Moving on, host differences. So not all hosts are equal. And that's what the current host profile is all about. And this is a problem I see with a lot of scripts. I've all too often, especially in Reddit and other forums, people are getting the version of PowerShell from $host instead of PS version table. So let's go here and let me look at my host. We'll come back to this. So if I do $host.version, you can see it's 7.3.9. Well, this is PowerShell 7.3.9. And let's go over here, $host. This is Ubuntu, $host.version 7.3.6. That's the correct version there. And let's look at let's just look at $host. So this is console host, and let me go back. This is console host, but let's go to the PowerShell extension instance of PowerShell here. $host. And you see this is the Visual Studio Code host, and look at the version. So if I did $host version, trying to figure out what version of PowerShell I'm on, that's not the right version. Yeah, and Stevie says that you'll get a different host for the ISE as well. And there's different hosts have different behaviors. Like ISE doesn't support the progress bar. And it doesn't support paging with more. But it also doesn't support anything beyond PowerShell 5.1, so don't use it. So my demo code here is showing you, let's just run this. Yeah, Visual Studio Code and PowerShell version from PS version table. Two very different values. So now let's talk about putting this all together. Let's see where my demos go. Okay. So some of the things you can do in your profile scripts, you can control your tools and application settings so that you get things set up the way you want to use them. You load the modules that you're going to use the most. But remember, as I was saying, you don't want to auto load. You don't want to load everything that you might use. Only load the things you use the most so that they're immediately available. Anything that you might use infrequently, PowerShell will auto load for you when you use the commandlet. So you can also define helper functions. And again, I would suggest taking helper functions out of your utility functions out of your profile and into a module. And your profile only define helper functions. And the difference that I'm making between these things is I have a bunch of utility functions that look like commandlets. that do stuff for me. And I've moved those to modules, and then helper functions are functions to make things easier in my profile. And you'll see examples of that when I dig into my profile. Some more configuration you can do is configuring your colors and your key bindings for PSReadline, and this PS default parameter values. This is a really handy thing. So in this example, you can see you can add the out variable parameter to out default. So anytime you run, let's see, anytime you run a command, it's automatic that outputs to the console. The output of that command is automatically piped by PowerShell to out default. And out default has this out variable parameter where you can capture the output into a variable as well. So by setting this default parameter value to last result, now I have last result has the same information I got from the command I ran. So it's a handy way of, oh, I ran that command, I should have saved the output. Well, you did. It's in last result. You might want to default your encoding to UTF-8, especially on Windows or PowerShell 5.1, since the default encoding is different on PowerShell 5.1. By setting it to UTF-8, you have consistent encoding across all the versions.
Hey, Sean,
Yeah.
on the last result, what happens if you run last result again after you've run a last result?
So it's a command that writes to the pipeline. So just inspecting last result. Well, I'm getting the last result, aren't I? It's not changing. But if I did something else like get date, then last result is the date. And then it's always going to be the same thing because I'm not changing last result, or it's rewriting last result to last result.
Nice. But the reason I asked that is I did this one time, and every time I did a command, it changed, and I couldn't figure out why. But you've done it right, and I obviously did it wrong.
So let's see here. This is also, you can configure your prompt. So default parameter values, let's see what I have here. So you can see the ones that I use. And you can have, very complicated prompt functions that do all kinds of things. At the end of this, I will, I'm using PoshGit. So PoshGit has a whole bunch of settings that you may want to change depending on your preferences. And if we want to get into it, I'll show you some tricks I do with my prompt. $PS style is the new thing in PowerShell 7 that allows you to do ANSI escape sequences. So you don't have to handcraft the sequences yourself. You can say, you can build strings by using $PS style dot bold to turn bold on, then put your string, and then $PS style dot bold off at the end. You concatenate all that together, or you could do that for the colors, using the colors and so on. And you'll see in my profile what I do. Now, you don't have this in PowerShell 5.1, but I have a way around that. And then PSReadline, you have all these key bindings, and you have all these options that you can set. So there's more colors that you can control there. And this is one I wanted to, when you're working on key bindings, this is a trick. If you run console : read key, it prompts you, and whatever key you press next, I'm going to do Control X. Whoops. There we go. It tells you what key you pressed. Undo that. Now, this is useful because on different operating systems, the keyboard input works differently. For example, I'm here in PowerShell on Windows, and I'm going to do this read key again, and I'm going to hit the I'm going to do Control Spacebar. Whoops. Make it focus. Control Spacebar. And look what it did. Let me try that again, just to make sure I'm doing this right. F8. Okay. Focus. Control Spacebar. Yeah, here it's showing up as F12. And that was remember the VSCode host. Let's run it in console host, and then Control Spacebar. So notice there, it did Control Shift D2. D2 here is the 2 character. So that would be the same as typing, Control @ on a US English keyboard. Control Shift 2. If I do this out here, let's grab that and paste it, and I do Control Spacebar, I get Control Spacebar. On Linux, what am I going to get here? Control D2. So this is important when you're mapping your key handlers for PSReadline. And then my last little trick is using symbolic links. So let's take a look at my my scripts. So if we go over, yeah, so here I am in my profile directory where my profile scripts are, and this is what I'm doing. My profile scripts are symbolic links that point into this subfolder, and it points, so the Microsoft.PowerShell_profile points to profiles current user current host _con host. And then the Microsoft VS Code profile points to current user current host VS Code PS1. And then the current user all hosts is the profile PS1, and it points to this other one. The reason I do that is I have commands to sync my my changes, and I've checked all of these files into I've checked all of these files into GitHub, and when I make changes to them in GitHub, I have a command that copies them from GitHub into this folder, and the symbolic link just points to that file. That way, all of my files. I don't have to worry about which one belongs where. I just dump them in the one folder, and the symbolic links hook them up for me automatically. This is also a way, I don't necessarily recommend doing this, but you could put, you could do this with OneDrive and sync your profile across multiple machines using OneDrive. That's fine for scripts like this, but it's bad for modules, and your modules are in the same profile location here. So I don't recommend doing that. There's other ways to sync the content here, but using symbolic links like that is a nice way to hook them up. And in my demo script that you have access to from the website, you can see how I create the symbolic links. Yeah, that was the symbolic links. Yeah, I don't know about roaming profiles on like Citrix and such. I would just say test performance and see if there's the problem with things that autosync like OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever. They lock the files and prevent PowerShell from being able to run them, and that causes problems for modules, especially. So, and they make them like they make them offline, so they're not physically on the local machine, but they get copied on demand, and that causes a problem for modules because they're not there when PowerShell goes to inspect the module, and it will fail to load, but then it'll get copied locally, and you could try again, but by that time, especially if you're scripting, your script has failed with an error. So I don't create the symlinks in my profile. It's something. It's part of setting up your machine. But they only need to be created once. And the point of your profile is stuff that you want to run every time PowerShell starts. So you don't want to create those symbolic links every time PowerShell starts. And then the last slide here is links to all the things I talk about and the demo scripts you can see. The one I want to point out here is this module. So as we said, when we were looking at the all the ANSI stuff, where was it here? Yeah, in PowerShell 5.1, we don't have PS style, $PS style. Well, I created a module for that called PS style, and you install this module and you load it in PowerShell 5.1, and then you have PS style in your environment. So if we go back to view terminal, and we go here and I go $PS style, you see that it's not there. If I run PowerShell with my profile, PS style, now I have everything. But you can see it's using the character 0x1b. So now let's take a look at my profile. We'll do $profile dot all users current host. And our profile, current user, current host. Is it not all users? It's I think I put it in current user, all hosts. Nope. All users, current host. No. Wait a second. Where did it go? There it is. Whatever. The fun of doing demos. Okay, so in my this is supposed to be my current user all hosts profile, and so these are the things that's common to across all of my hosts that is my general configuration. So the first thing I do is I set up TLS 1.2, and then I get in here and I've got a section here for version specific things. So I check if my version is less than 6.0, then I create those is variables. And I set them all to false, but is Windows I set to true. That way I can use these variables later on in my script. And this is where I import the PS style module as well. This is a little trick where in Windows, since Windows PowerShell 5.1 ships with PSReadline, except the version of PSReadline it ships with uses a lowercase l. That's part of what causes update help to fail for PSReadline. So if you remove the module and you re-import it with the uppercase L, then update help works better. So just something to keep in mind. This prediction source setting is used for PSReadline options. I'm setting my prediction source to history because Windows PowerShell 5.1 doesn't support the plugin model that gives you the predictors, the plugins. So it only supports predictions from history. If this is not 5.1, then it's automatically set to history and plugin. But this allows me to override it for 5.1. And then if my version is 7.2 or greater, greater than or equal to 7.2, then it's history and plugin. I load this completion predictor module, and this adds more predictions to the command line. Now I get into the OS specific stuff. So if it is Windows, I'm going to map some more registry drives. This is where I can do some magic to check and see if I'm running as admin, and I set the is admin variable. I register some argument completers for winget. And then, if it's Linux, there's some modules that I want to load, and the same modules for Mac. This module doesn't work for Windows. It doesn't apply to Windows, but it's useful on Unix-based systems. The next is stuff I set up to configure for Git. And I'm checking to see if I have the GitHub command line utility installed. And if I do, then I run this invoke expression that turns on tab completion for the GitHub client CLI. Now I get into my PSReadline options. I'm setting the prompt continuation stuff that I want for my environment. This is where I use that prediction source setting variable. And this is how I map my keys. So I created this hash table. This is the name of the function, the PSReadline function, and this is the key that it binds to. And I wanted the same key bindings to work across all platforms. So a lot of these are predefined on Windows, but they're not defined on Linux. So I just have one big hash table here, and then down here I have a loop that loops through the hash table and defines all of these chords. Yeah, hard links are more dangerous. You're better off using the symbolic link. So now, and you see, I added comments here. I showed you with the read key function. Control D2 is what you got when you hit Control Spacebar, and I want to map that to menu complete so that it works in Linux. On Mac, you can use the Alt key, but you have to enable it in Mac OS Terminal or iTerm2. So any of these Alt keys, you need to do that special configuration, and that's outside of PowerShell. That's the terminal app itself. There's an example in our documentation about where to do that. I can show you later. So that maps all my keys. I set up my, I add a add to history handler here. So in PSReadline, it automatically saves all your commands to history. Well, with this, it filters. And if the length of the command I type is less than 4 characters, or it begins with a space or ends with a semicolon, then it doesn't add it to the history file. It's in memory history, so you can view your history in memory and get back to it, but it doesn't add it to the file. So that way your history file doesn't get filled with dir commands. Then I have all my color theming, and this is where now I have the PSReadline module, and I can use expressions like this to set my colors, and I don't have to try to figure out the ANSI escape sequences. And then I set up all my prompts, and I have very complicated prompts, and I could spend a whole hour talking you through all of my prompt stuff. One of the cool things you'll see when I get to my the other script file here, I have multiple prompts, and I have a way to switch between them. There's my default parameter values. And then I have helper functions. And these helper functions are used inside my profile. I could use them from the command line, but they need to be here for my profile to work. And so I didn't put them in an external module. They're defined right here in the profile. And that's the difference I make between helper functions and utility functions. I put my utility functions in a module, and helper functions are where the help is needed. Like switch prompt. This is the one where I can change my prompt between these 4 different ones. And I'll show you that here in a minute. So that's the current user all hosts, and then the current user current host is where I get more specific. And so here I'm loading some type libraries for different things, and I import the modules that I use the most, and I set some aliases and you know, this documentarian module requires it doesn't run on PowerShell 5.1, so I'm loading that only on 7 and above. And then there's a bunch of stuff I do for managing my GitHub repos. That's what this is all about. And last thing I do is I set my prompt. I set the prompt function equal to the variable $prompts my prompt. And is that back here? Yeah, so you can see here's all my prompts. I have this hash table. And so here's the default prompt. And then this is my custom prompt. And then this is the standard prompt you get from PoshGit. And then the simple prompt is just, PS greater than. So what I can do here is I have an alias, SWP, and it just cycles between all of the prompts. Come on. Or I could say, I want to go to my prompt. So anyway, that's really the core content of the presentation here. This was my approach to how to split the profile into different functional parts and how I manage it, and how to manage settings for the cross-version, cross-platform environments. And if any question, PS remoting. So if you do like enter PS session to have an interactive command line on a remote system, PowerShell does not run the profile if there is one on the remote system. If you want that profile to run, you just have to .source it on that remote command line.
Does a $profile variable exist?
That's what I can't remember. It may not be populated, so you would have to, do it by full path. But yeah, it's specifically they didn't want the remote profile to pollute your environment, basically.
Mm-hmm. Or to not necessarily know what's there.
Right.
Know what's there because it's a remote machine. It could be anything.
Right.
Yeah. So how often do you come into your profile and actually edit it and kind of do it, or it's kind of like one of these things where you took some time, you took some hours, and you set and forget and kind of go from there? Or is it something that you kind of like use as a living document over and over again?
I'm probably in this more than a lot of people. But more than that is, so I have a command here that epro, what that does is it opens VSCode in my repository where I keep all of my modules that I've created, and this is where all my profile scripts are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll come in and edit them here, and then I sync these changes into that profiles folder in my home directory.
Okay. So you kind of have a workflow to kind of keep it, sane.
Right. And what I'm doing more than editing my profile is I'm tweaking things in these different modules. And like I used to have a bunch of functions in my profile, and I've moved them all into this essential utils module.
Mm-hmm.
So I took them out of the profile, and like my Git tools is one that I use heavily. So there's like 4 modules that I load in my profile. The rest of these, like this data conversion one, I don't load. But if we look at the commands in it, I have all these convert from, convert to things. Well, if I type convert from base 64, it loads the module automatically. So why do I need to load this in my profile every time?
Mm-hmm.
And that's important, especially for larger, more complex modules. They can take longer to load at profile time, and if you're not using them, don't load them.
So, but the only advantage there is it just pollutes the memory space at that point. It doesn't, there's no performance hit as far as, after the fact once it's loaded anyway.
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. So,
Yeah, that first command might be the slow because it loads the module and then runs, but you run that command again and it's already loaded.
okay. And there's no reason to take that slow hit if it's never ever going to be used at all.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Right.
Okay. So long as it's in your module paths and all that kind of stuff, and you're putting them in the right places, then you don't have to think about it.
Right.
Got it.
And I actually have a build script I have here where what it does is I'm using a file share, and it builds the modules and publishes them to a local file share repository, and then I can do install module from my local repository to get my updated version.
Okay. So going back to even you had the Git tools thing and you had a bunch of argument completers, you need to load that module in order to get those argument completers in there, right?
Yes.
So that is a requirement there. So it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the ones I always load because I use Git all day, and I want my tools.
But in that function, because the module is nothing or is some, but they're helper functions with argument completers, you need those argument completers in memory. So
Yes.
it has to load.
Yes.
So you can't wait for like the dynamic loading.
Right.
Okay, I got it. So things that don't need to be loaded, but things that are like argument completers. Actually, you know what? I think I could. If I could cut, because I use argument completers a lot, and I could take it all out and just put it into a module that just loads that, and then leave all the other stuff that's along with the, right? Because that's what you're really saying.
Right.
Because all I really want is the argument completers out of that part. Gotcha.
Yep.
Interesting. That's cool. All right.
So,
thanks.
Yeah. And
any other questions? What's in chat? You've been doing a good job so far.
Yep. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, that's my repo. So the Git tools thing, my Git environment's crazy. So there's a function I run that's in that Git tools module that builds this this variable in memory. It's a hash table with all this information about my Git repos. These are all the repos that I track. I have cloned. Most of them are forks and clones, and so there's 85 repos here. And if we go look at, well, let me switch into a. So now I'm in this presentations repo, and if I do a show repo data, this is the data that's in that global variable. And so it's tracking my remotes and what the default branch is and so on. And then I have functions. Let me go like to So let's go over here. This is the Azure Docs PR repo. This is the repository that contains all of the Azure documentation. It's huge. It's 13 gigs. And I have a function called sync repo that does a fetch upstream, and then it does a rebase, and then it does a push to my origin. And so now my local is in sync with both upstream and my origin. Yeah, git fetch origin prune, and then it rebases, and now it's pushing all of that change to my fork. And it's all driven off of that variable there. And using main instead of master is the new norm, yes, but it's not. You can't count on that being, and that's why in that was it show repo data. This default branch information, this is going to be main or master or whatever the default branch is for the repo. That way, I don't have to know. My scripts handle it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And some on some repos, the dev branch might be the default branch, and main becomes essentially the live branch. But you do all your commits to dev first. So it just depends on the repo. So that's one of the helpers I've built. I have helper functions for creating PRs and for, in my workflow, I have a GitHub issue that I'm working on, and I need to make a work item in Azure DevOps for it. And I need to create a working branch for it to do the work in. And so I have a commandlet that will import the GitHub issue into a new DevOps work item and create a working branch, check out a working branch for me to begin doing my work. So I have a lot of shortcuts that I've built.
I'd like to point out that along these shortcuts that you've built, you did these, I'm guessing, to make your work life easier and faster and more consistent.
Oh, yeah.
That be correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And you can see here where I've customized my prompt. I'm using PoshGit to get the Git information. So this is showing you the state of my Git repo here. And so I have 0 new files, 1 changed file, and 0 deleted files. But I'm also using information here from my data model. So this is the name of the repo, and this is the current branch I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at where I am, pwd, you can see I'm on d:"git, my repos, presentations, and then content downloads profiles. Well, when I'm in a Git repo, it changes my prompt, so it truncates out the base path of the repo and just shows me where I am within that repo. Now, when I change, say, to the root, I'm back to a normal prompt.
That's cool.
A normal path. But I'm back here. So if I do a git status, and I did this demo in a previous meeting, you can see I have 1 modified file, and that's what it's showing me here in this status. which is nice to see. Now, there's a couple other things you can see here in my.
Wait a minute, before you go on, what is this CD dash that you did?
CD dash goes to the last place you changed from.
Is that universal?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Always a tidbit that you find out.
You know what?
Blow your mind.
That was worth sticking around to the end for sure. Woo! Okay, I'm out. That was so amazing. That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, and then PS Style has this method called format hyperlink, and there is a special ANSI escape sequence that you can do to create a hyperlink in terminal. So what I've done here is my repo data, it knows the URL to the repo, right? So I've wired up presentations here to be a hyperlink. If I hold down the control key and click, it opens up the repo. And I've wired up the path here. If I control click on the path, it opens File Explorer at that location.
Oh, that's why I've never seen it. CD minus is a PowerShell 7 thing. It's not in 5.1. Can it be in 5.1?
I believe it's in 5.1. Yeah.
Well, it didn't work for me in 5.1, and I had to go to PowerShell 7 to find it.
Let me see.
Oh, man. Oh, it's so good.
Let me go CD PowerShell. So I'm a couple CD minus.
There's no location history left.
Yeah, I guess it is a PowerShell 6 and above. One of the things they changed in PowerShell 7 here recently is now CD dash works, and CD space dash and CD dash both work the same way.
So when I do it over and over again, it just goes back in history.
Yes.
So I did it twice, and it says there's no history available.
Right.
To go. So
yeah,
it doesn't just go back and forth between two folders. That's what I was thinking it's going to do. Hey, keep going to last. No, but it keeps going like up the queue.
Yeah, it's think of CD. The CD command is, well, it's like push D and pop D, right?
Yeah.
Push D pushes it on the stack. Pop D pops it off. And when you run out of stack, there's nowhere to go.
So it's jumping in the stack.
Yeah. But it's not affecting the push D, pop D stack. It's a separate history list.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Maybe
so
I
yeah,
put an alias inside of my 5.1 to do that. Rather, right?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. So there's lots of cool things you can do with your prompt with ANSI escape sequences.
What else? What are they thinking of that?
Yeah, PowerShell keeps 20 locations.
It does. But that's in 7. And it's not in 6 and 5. But it wouldn't be too hard to add it, though.
Well, there's no. You would have to use pop location, push location, and pop location, and wrap that in the alias.
Yeah.
Because there is no stack. That's the only way you get a stack. Or you could write your own.
Yeah, I'm saying you could write your own stack and wrap it because you're gonna wrap it yourself.
Yeah.
But that's only if you have to stay in 5.1, because some of the stuff I use has to be in 5.1. Doesn't support 6 and 7. All right. Well, thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
You're always a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of resources, and I really appreciate you sharing with us tonight.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining the Research Triangle PowerShell user group. Don't forget to join us in person, where we meet the first and the third Wednesday of every month. You can also find us on our YouTube channel, and all these videos will be posted there. Thanks again, and have a good night.